Ollie, and today I'm going to be talking about diabetes management. I personally was interested in diabetes just because of the prevalence of it in clinical, and because of being in that clinical setting, I was interested in diving a little bit deeper into it and trying to understand it from a new perspective. Um, One thing that I always thought was interesting was trying to see how lifestyle interventions could help alleviate some of the complications or issues that come from certain disease processes. And since diabetes is the most common endocrine disorder in the world, I figured it would be a good start to go through it. And my PICO question that arose was from seeing the different ways you could help control your diabetes. Um, in terms of why I picked the yoga and exercise portion, that's just because I personally like to run, and so I thought it'd be interesting to see the research around that. My PICO question altogether was, does resistance training outweigh aerobic training in improving glycemic controls in adults with type 2 diabetes? And so I decided to do my research off of that. When I was going through the search process, I found that there's a lack of clarity on which exact modality is better, which helped lead to my research question. My search process was through PubMed specifically, and I used, within the past 5 years, randomized controlled trials, and then one qualitative article, and then I also used Boolean operators such as AND to put aerobic training and diabetes, resistance training and diabetes, and then exercise and diabetes to get my results. One key finding that I had as I was compiling my research was that although the research isn't all there yet, and we can't say that aerobic or resistance training one is better than the other, what I did find was that resistance training actually has a big role in muscle related issues from diabetes, and it brings into question whether resistance training might actually be better for controlling muscle related issues that arise from diabetes, and that's something that aerobic training doesn't solve as effectively, which is very interesting. Aerobic exercise is absolutely still very, very useful, and one of the studies that I had showed that hemoglobin A1C did decrease as people continued their running and their aerobic exercise regimen. However, it is interesting to note that because there's a difference, it might change how we could potentially educate patients. Some limitations of my papers were that some of them were from a lot of different cultures and countries, and so that cultural aspect could come into play and change some of the results, and so it's hard to say exactly whether we can go off of them or rely on them because of all the cultural differences. Another thing was that a lot of times the diets weren't exactly managed or educated on because they were just assessing exercise. And so there's definitely some more education or research rather that needs to be done to really determine which one's better. My second key finding was that at the end of the day, it really just depends on what's more approachable and efficient for the patient, because one of the qualitative studies I looked at had patients give their opinion, and a lot of times the patients argued that they weren't really followed up with by their providers, they weren't managed, and there was a lack of attention from the healthcare providers in order to manage these patients' diabetes. And so that was very interesting, and I think that because of that, my second key finding was whatever might be more efficient is definitely going to outweigh trying to chase aerobic training or trying to chase resistance training, because there's a lack of emphasis from healthcare providers a bit, and so because of that, it might be better to educate on whatever the patient can actually handle. In conclusion, I would recommend to actually hold off on educating one modality better than the other, and that there definitely needs to be more research into this. Altogether, we should probably personalize exercise plans, and so that's more of a ground level decision, not something that you can make from way up. So people in part of healthcare teams need to come together and really assess whether a patient might benefit from one or the other, and have that enthusiasm to help the patient change. Thank you, and if you have any questions, please let me know.